Hey, what's going on? Want to automate, particularly with automation account. By default, automation account only seems to be working with two different kinds of triggers. Manual, as the name implies, is when you click run, or on a schedule where you set a date and time and that's when it will trigger. But the best of automations trigger right when they occur. You don't want to schedule a scan every 15 minutes. Grab whatever it is you're trying to capture. No, you want it triggering right when the event takes place. Not only reduces cost, since you're not scheduling all the time, but it makes it more efficient because it's instant. There are a few ways to actually do this with automation account that just aren't so obvious. And they're done using Azure's built-in services. One of them is called Azure Alerts, which I'll showcase in the future, but the other one is called EventGrids. That's what I'll demo today. We'll just keep it simple today because I just want to unpack EventGrid itself. So we'll just check when there's a change in a storage account, pick up that change as it occurs using EventGrid, which we will then instantly use to trigger a runbook. This will prime us for future content where I'll show you in more interesting ways we can use EventGrid with automation account. Either way, let's not waste any more time and get started. Alright, so EventGrid, the middleman between two things. First is where an event takes place, also known as the event source. Second is where this event is sent to, our destination, our event handlers. And between these two things is where EventGrid sits. Pass in the data that comes from the source to the destination. Lots of ways to tackle EventGrid. I'm just going to focus on how operations teams can leverage it. As I mentioned, there's two things, right? Source can be anything in Azure. For example, it could be as open-ended as a subscription itself, or you can narrow the scope down to a source that's just a resource group, or you can narrow it even further and make it particular resources. And if it is a specific resource, you can drill down even deeper into it as well. Like for instance, a storage account where blobs are added or removed on a particular container. You can capture those events when they happen. Or we can go even deeper and say only certain kinds of blobs. Maybe they're a particular file or they're being placed in a particular path, right? We can do all that. And on the other end, the destination, the endpoint, it can be many things too, not just limited to automation account like I'm demoing today. In fact, it could be used with Azure Function, logic apps, it could be storage accounts, it could be service bus, it could be event hub. And with webhooks, you can pretty much do any service really. Automation account is one of those. And what is it really used for? It's used to integrate applications, help building of pipelines, or in our case, use it for instant alerting systems. As always, let's learn by doing and get everything ready. First, let's make ourselves a storage account. Create one if you don't have one. I just happen to have one from before. I have a storage account here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make a container in here. This container, I'll call it EventGrid test. So this is going to be our source. The storage account itself, not just that container. Next, if you have an automation account, great. Otherwise, you can create one. I have a video on that as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a runbook here. I'm just going to quickly create an automation account since we're just going to be playing around with EventGrid anyways. I'm making an actual proper script today. So this one let's just call it test EventGrid. Yeah, I think that's fine. As for the code itself, all I want you to put for now is a parameter because something is going to trigger this and it's going to send data in. You need to capture it with a parameter. I'll just call it webhook data. This is the default that you get when you make a webhook. And what I'll do is I'll just output it. So I'll do webhook data, convert to JSON just so it's a little bit more clear to read in the output. And secondly, I'll do webhook data, body, convert to JSON again, so we can see both different field areas properly. And in the middle, I'll just add a lower right output so that we have a separation, just like that. So our runbook will trigger by something that's going to send it webhook data, and then we're just going to display it, and then we're going to display whatever is in the request body as well. And if you're curious how I got this, just Google webhooks, runbooks. It will guide you to how you can set this up. It's pretty standard. Okay, so we have the two things, right? We have the storage account, our source, and then our runbook, which is going to be the destination. Now let's make the event grid itself. In order to do that, you can do it in two places actually. If you ever notice when you ever have a resource, you'll see the word events. You can click here and pretty much make an event grid. I'm not going to show this route because I want to show you the more general way to do it. On the search at the top, just type the word EventGrid and it'll show up as a service. This is where we want to be. It's not a resource in a marketplace or anything. This is actually just something that's in the portal. What you make in here is what's going to become resources. And the first thing you can make inside an event grid is called a topic. Topic is simply a place where events get sent to. The topic itself is where we'll connect our source. There's a lot of different things here. You can ignore most of them. I'm only going to focus on one, which is system topics. System topics specifically are Azure native event sources that are already wired up for you so you don't have to build them up from scratch, which is perfect for us since we're just interacting with Azure resource and services. Before I proceed, note that there's no option yet to setting up RBAC. Normally, whenever you're in any service, you have that option, right? Like if I go to my automation account, you have RBAC access that you can set up. But on this page, you don't. So then if you don't have access to event grids, how are you able to create them, right? If you have access to the source, like the storage account, and in there, the RBAC to create system topics and general write access to the storage account, you should be able to create it. So you don't need across the tenant access to be able to do this. If you have access on the storage account itself, you can create a system topic for that storage account. Otherwise, if there are other people who don't have this access but need to manage their own topics, you might have to initially create it for them and then give them permissions on the topic itself, which is where RBAC does exist. Anyways, let's create one. So under system topics, I'm going to hit create and it'll open up this creation page. And the first section, basics, we'll get to select our topic types. Recall earlier I said you can have different scopes. You can have subscription, resource group, a resource. There's many different kinds that you can set here. So if you open this, you'll see many services. I'm just going to select storage accounts. And then it's going to ask me to point to a particular storage account. This isn't just storage accounts in general. It's for a particular storage account that I'm setting this to. I'm going to select where the storage account is, which is in corporate management. And then the resource group right here. And if your path was correct, you will see the storage account under resource. One thing to note is this topic is going to be created in the same resource group as the storage account. So whatever you selected here is where it's going to be created. So you can't have it in a separate place than the storage account itself. Moving on, you get to give it a name now. So what I'll do is I'll stick to my format for my company and say Corpo, EG for EventGrid Topic. And then I'll just give it the name of the storage account itself. So I'll say SA Corpo Management 001. And lastly, you can enable the manage identity here, or you can do it once it's created. Technically, for what we're doing today, it's not even going to use manage identities. But in the future, I am going to show you how to do this in another video. So I'm just going to enable it anyways for system assigned. And that's it. I'm going to hit next, and then I'll just add in all my generic tags. Hit review and create, validation pass. Let's move forward. Okay, our resource is done. I'm going to hit go to resource and it's going to open our topic. Now, if I go back to that page I had initially opened called Event Grids, and if I click system topics, you will see the collection of system topics that you made across your tenant here. So you don't have to look for them within the resource group. You can just find the collection here too. Okay, clicking that again. So now we have our first Event Grid system topic. This is officially listening to that storage account for any events that take place. It's pretty open-ended right now, but it's not going to do anything with them. We still need to subscribe to our destination, our endpoint, our event handler, whatever it is you want to call it. So you can set up RBAC now. So if you want to grant someone else permissions, you can. There is this thing called event subscriptions. This is where you'll plug it to a destination, but also start filtering and selecting what kind of data it is you want to collect. You can either click the plus here, or you can go to this and click it here as well. And you may notice that it has a whole section and you can add them and you see a table. That means for one topic, you can have multiple subscriptions. So you can have one subscription set for our automation account, one for Azure Functions, another one for automation account that's filtering different data and going to a different runbook, whatever it is you want, right? That's what subscriptions allow you to do. You can create multiple. I'm just gonna hit the plus icon to add an event subscription. Then we'll configure that. I've opened the creation screen for the event subscription. Let's unpack as we make this. The first thing is pretty straightforward. It's just giving it a name. This one, I'm not going to be too picky about its name because this is not a resource. This is a item within a resource kind of thing, right? Then you'll see the word schema. And if you click it, you'll see three options. EventGrid schema is like the official Microsoft one. And then the cloud event schema is like more of a general one that is accepted across many different services. And the custom input one is something that you kind of build. I haven't even looked at that one, so I don't have much to say, but EventGrid schema is good enough. That's what I will be working with today, so let's leave that. Down below here, you'll see event types, and then it gives you filters to event types. If I click this, you'll see a list of items that EventGrid is able to pick up. Because we made the topic into something for storage accounts, as you can see, everything's storage account related. I'm just gonna keep it as is. I like that. Blob created, blob deleted. That's what we're gonna work with. But if you wanted to add any of the other fields, you can. And then finally, you'll see endpoint type. This is where we point to a resource. I have another tab open for your newly created runbook. This is the one I want to use, right? Test EventGrid. So what I'm gonna select here when I press endpoint type, not pretty clear. You don't see automation account, like you see Azure functions. You do not see Runbook. That is because we're going to use something called a webhook. So back to our runbook itself. So you open the runbook. Let's set up this webhook here. One of the options right on the left side, or this button. And when you click it, you can see this also allows you to make multiple webhooks for this one runbook. I'm going to hit add webhook. Then let's give it a name. We'll just call it test EventGrid webhook. Now you may notice that it has an expiration. That's interesting. This is because the URI or the URL you see here has a token. Up until now, we worked with APIs, and everything we had, the token was separated from the URI and the URL. This is not the case here. Like if you copy this and do an API call from any machine, it will trigger my runbook. There's no OAuth to process. There's no identities that you have to authenticate in. You have this URL, you can trigger runbook. This is like a bearer token right there visible. I don't know about you, I'm not a fan of this. I really am not. As somebody who takes identity pretty serious, I don't like having tokens be so exposed in a lot of ways and always be the same. As long, like for example, like if I change this expiry for a year from now, that means for a year from now, this token is valid with this URI. You put this in, it'll work for a whole year. But you have to be very mindful of two things here. One, that your webhooks expire. So you have to create a new one every so often. And two, you need to protect this so that once you place it somewhere, it's not something that can easily be accessed by someone. I'm just going to copy this. We'll come back to that later. Just make sure you copy it. Otherwise, you have to create it again. And then let's press this configure parameters and run settings. Create is grayed out, but you need to press this. And you will see our parameter that we entered earlier showed up here. Leave it as is. And this run setting, if you had a hybrid worker, you would have the option to say that whenever this webhook is triggered, it would trigger the hybrid worker, but we don't have one, so it's fine. Just press update. Now the create button is not grayed out. Just press create. With the webhook URL copied, let's go back to our event description. And down here where it says endpoint type, select webhook. Scroll down. If it was across from another tenant, you can enable this, but it's not. Just press this configure an endpoint. And then it will give you a space where you can type that URI. Hit confirm selection, and that's it. Let me just show you the other tabs, and then we'll hit done. So the first section is called filters. This is where you can really start drilling down. Like in this first section in basics over here, I selected when blobs are created and deleted. That's where we're going to capture. Filter means we can take this one step further. Okay, a blob is created, but what kind? Maybe we only want to capture when it's a text file or a CSV file or a JSON file, whatever it is, right? I'm going to ignore this for now. We'll come back to this later after we have created it. The next section is called additional features. This is where you decide how you want to handle the events that are being captured. Dead lettering, so that if it can't be sent to whatever it is it's supposed to be sent to, maybe we want to store it to a storage account. So if I hit enable dead lettering, you'll see it'll say, hey, is there a storage account you want to store it to in case it doesn't get to Runbook? Retry policy, and these are just like, okay, if it fails to send, try again, and how long to try for before you just give up, and et cetera, et cetera. There's other things, but anyways, let's move forward. Then we have delivery properties. So what's interesting is when a event is sent to our Runbook, it's going to send certain data. Maybe we want to add more to it. So this is where we can add more to the header so that when Runbook receives it, there's additional information that it gets that may not be available when it initially just ran. So you have the option of doing that. This is something we'll also explore later. Either way, I'm satisfied with the basics for now, and let's hit create. There it is, our EventGrid subscription got created. I click it, not much to see here. You will get metrics like when this event takes place and see the timeline of how it's behaving. But you also now have the options to modify these things. So if you want to modify the filters, you can do it now. Same with the delivery properties and additional features, you can do that as well. Set up our sources connected to the topic. Within the topic is a subscription that is filtering and telling us where to send the data to. That's it. Pretty straightforward. It's configured now, so why don't we test it? I'll go to the overview. I want to show you how quick this is. I'll go to containers, and I'm going to add a file to one of the containers. We'll do it to the one we just created, the EventGrid test. I have a few test files here. I'm going to put this text file, hit upload. As soon as I uploaded, let's have a look at our runbook. I'm going to hit refresh and look, it's already queued. That's how fast that was. Look how fast that was. That didn't even take seconds before it just triggered the runbook. You already put in queue and is ready to fire. And when you look here, you'll see an input. This is all the parameter data coming in, and this is what it sent. Kind of hard to read here, but let's just see what the output looks like. It'll be a lot more clear when it does. So let's just let it finish and we'll look at outputs. Just because EventGrid is fast doesn't mean automation account is fast. It takes a while to start and finish. We'll have to wait for this one. Of course, speed is a thing that you care about. You can always get a hybrid worker as in your own VM. That'll be a lot faster, but then you're paying for a VM. Okay, and it completed. I was hoping the request body would be a lot more clear to read, but it's not. Either way, you can see our webhook name shows up. So what webhook was used. And then the request body has all the information about the blob. I'll get there shortly. Then you see request headers. So when I mentioned earlier that you can add your own custom headers with your own information, this is where they will show up. X usually in headers is like a variable. So we'll add our own later. But let me copy this and put in Visual Studio Code and parse it manually. Okay, I try to parse it as best as I can. Basically, there's a section called Topic that is showing us what the source was. So this is telling us that the EventGrid captured this from this storage account. Then you have Subject, which tells you what file we're talking about. So it's this particular file within this folder. Event Type is telling you if it was a creation or a deletion. Yeah, there's other stuff too, but like, who cares? These three particularly are good ones. This is good because it's telling us where it happened. So it happened in the storage account. That's right here. What happened? A blob got created. Which one? What was the name? This is it. And same thing, if it was a blob deleted, it would just say this. If I deleted that file, it would just say blob deleted like that, right? So this is what we're capturing. Now, what it doesn't tell me is which EventGrid sent it. Maybe I have multiple EventGrid sending it to this particular runbook, for example, right? It'd be nice that if that information was there too, it told me that the topic and the subscription. So let me show you how we can modify headers first. So let's go back to our subscription and then let's go to delivery properties. Let's make our own variables. I'll call this X for variable, EG for EventGrid, and I'll say the word topic. And this, I'll add the name of our topic, which is that. And the second one, XEG subscription, telling us which subscription in this topic are we getting. Just like that. Now, if it was secret, you could also say is secret. I'm just going to leave it as plain text. That's it. Next time this subscription sends something to our runbook, these two variables will show up. Hit save. And if we go back to our container, I'm going to delete it this time because we're capturing create and delete, right? And that should trigger another runbook. It did. Completed. Click it and go to output. And there they are. Look, we have the topic name and we have the subscription name. Now we have full data on which EventGrid sent it, for what source, what happened in that source, as well as the name of the file that happened. Let's take this one step further and make this a little bit more clear. I don't want this. I want proper PowerShell. So let's remove all this and keep our request data. Then instead of convert to, let's do convert from. I think it was already a JSON. And that will make it into an object. And let's store this in a variable called events. And then we can say, I don't know, write output, action taken place in storage account. If I recall correctly, reason it didn't work or didn't show it properly was because it was an array. Okay. So what we can do is for each event in events, even if it is just one. And recall earlier, I also converted this from JSON. That's because it was actually an object. And recall here, this is an object. There's a request header. Within it is key value pairs. So if I wanted to get one of them, I just do request header dot one of these names. If I wanted the topic, I'd get it like this. If I wanted the description, this. And now because we're capturing events here, I can do event.topic and it'll give me the values that are stored in topic, which is the whole resource path. And then the event type, which is right here, what it did. And then subject, which is right here. Let's actually capture all three of those things. Let's just make it a little more clean. I'll put these here too and do this. Write output on each of them. Oh, I can. I did not know you could do that. I would have made it a lot easier. It's something I learned from Visual Studio Code, selecting multiple lines. That. Okay, let's publish that. And I'm going to add another file again. So we'll do upload, browse for files, test file, upload. It's cute. And look at that. A lot cleaner than what we saw earlier. So now we know where it got triggered by, on what storage account, what it did, what file, right? Because we have it as objects in PowerShell, now you can manipulate and do all sorts of things, right? Maybe it's not just an output. Maybe it's an alert sent to someone or logged in SharePoint or whatever. So back to our topic, let's go to our subscription and let's click filters. Now maybe I don't care about text files. I only want to capture when it's CSVs or Excel documents. A few ways to do that. Either you press enable subject filtering and then it gives you begins with, ends with. I just use advanced filters just because it gives you so much more options. But you can do the same thing that you would have in the subject filters. So let's just do them here. The exact same things we saw. So just click add new filter and then you will see a pop-up for key. And when we looked at our webhook data, you would see things like data, you would see things like topic, you would see things like subject somewhere, see subject, right? So that subject has the file extension and it has like the container path, right? So what we could do here is we can say subject to indicate that particular one. And it tells you right here, the valid keys. I'm going to say for subject, if it ends with, and then it gives you the option to add up to 25 values. Press this icon. And let's say .xlsx. That's an extension for Excel documents. And if you want to add more, you just press add new value, do .csv. So now going forward, if we add a text file, our runbook will not get triggered because it is filtering it out. Everything you add here is what's going to be actually a part of it. And then you can press add new filter. So anything you add in values is an OR field. So it's either XLSX or CSV. Every new filter you add, like I just did here, that is an AND statement. So we're saying not only is it one of these, it's also string begins with. We can see this is the path. You can say it begins with, and then remove file name. We can even remove blob. So now it will only trigger if we add an Excel document that's in this container. We got to put a slash at the front. And let's add 3 files. I'm gonna add the text file, I'm gonna add the CSV file, and I'm gonna add the Excel file, all at the same time. And look at that, you can see 2 jobs are queued. There's my Excel document. There is my CSV file. I delete them all at the same time. 2 new jobs got queued. That's interesting. Runbook queues multiple jobs for each event that takes place rather than putting it all together. But yeah, there it is. That's EventGrid in a nutshell. I really want to make a system that if we are to use automation account with EventGrid, it is based on identity architecture. Had we used FunctionApps, we would have been fine. And if you don't know, FunctionApps are serverless automations. We can use PowerShell within them just like we use PowerShell in Runbooks. FunctionApps and Runbooks, why use one or the other? Runbooks, as we've already experienced, are exactly where you would put your PowerShell scripts, and they would handle all levels of PowerShell scripting, whether it's something small and simple, something that's vast and labor intensive. Functions, on the other hand, are generally it's between apps. So if an app has some kind of action that it takes place rather than happening within the app, you can have it outside in a function app instead. But because it gives us the option to use PowerShell, we in operations can leverage them too. And for us, it's mainly when we're scripting something simple that we want fast and readily available, it is great for that. But with function apps comes a lot more work to set it up and use. Compared to automation account, it's like a platform where we have everything configured and ready to go. We just add more scripts to it as we go. And there are way more tools available for PowerShell and automation account. Not to mention, automation account has hybrid workers. So if you wanted to run your automation in an on-prem server, you could do that. And all the modules that we install, including our own custom ones, we can do that with Runbooks. And if you have long runtimes in your scripts because they're just massive, Runbooks can handle that. But if the jobs are simple and fast, maybe functions aren't enough. We have a challenge where our automation account cannot directly communicate with EventGrid without using webhooks. But function apps can because they integrate directly with EventGrid. Well, if EventGrid integrates with function apps like how we want to, and function apps can interact with runbooks like we want to, identity-based, why don't we make it the broker that sits between runbooks and EventGrid? So now, instead of it being a storage account that goes to EventGrid that goes to runbooks, we can now make it a storage account that goes to EventGrid that goes to function apps that goes to runbooks. And it will still be fast. It's not going to be any slower than it was before because function apps are rapid firing. And I'll unpack function apps today at a very basic level, just to get you up to speed on how to use them if you have never used them before. Let's not waste any more time. Let me show you how we can do this. The first thing, so let's make our function app and then let's start putting this all together. So what we want to do now is just have a resource group created. I already created one, RGCC Management Function App 001. And here is where I'm going to start putting all of our function app resources that go along with it when you create it. So let's do that. So in your resource group that you're going to build the function app, hit create. And in the marketplace, just search function app. You'll see it here, hit create, and then you'll get different hosting plans. This is a newer one called Flex Consumption. I'm not going to show you this today, but when we make a proper function app in the future, this is what we'll use. And then there's another one called Consumption all the way to the right. And when you click it, it even warns you, hey, we have a new one, use that. It's okay, ignore it. And what consumption just means, it's pay as you go. So every time the function is used is when it's going to be accruing cost. But that doesn't mean that every time it runs, it's going to cost money. If you look at the pricing for function apps, you can see that per month, you get 100,000 gigabytes per second execution time for free every month. And it resets the next month and over and over. Same is true with the executions. You can have 250,000 executions before it starts accruing costs. And even when it gets there, look at the cost. It's pennies. It's nothing. Like 40 cents per million executions. That's nothing. So yeah, you can pretty much think it's a free service because it's going to be very hard for you in your lab environment to create a scenario where you're going to hit those metrics. Anyways, back to our function app. First thing we'll do is just give it a name. I'm going to just call it Func App Test. For operating system, it doesn't really matter. Let's just leave it as Windows. And then the more important thing is runtime stack. When you select that, you will see all these different languages you can use. So function app is one of those things where it can use many languages that are out there. So you can use Python, .NET, JavaScript, etc., etc. But we're just going to use PowerShell. And when you select that, it gives you a version. 7.4 is perfect. And region, Canada Central, that's where it's going to deploy to. Let's hit next. Now, unlike an automation account, function apps need a storage account. All of its files are actually going to be stored in this storage account. it is recommended that every time you make a function app, all of them have their own independent storage accounts. But again, don't worry, it's not going to cost much, if at all. You can leave the settings as is. Nothing really to see here. If you want to change the name of the storage account, you can. Next, we have networking. Because we're using the very simple consumption plan, there's not much we can do except for enabling public or access or not. We can leave it on. It's still going to be identity based, so you can't just access it freely. Next up is monitoring. So this is important. You do have the option to turn this off, but I highly recommend you don't. We want application insights. What application insights give us is the ability to see the logs as they happen in our function app. So whenever it's triggered or whenever there's an error, anything like that, you will not have any visibility into it unless you have an app insight. So just leave it as is and let's hit next. Next is deployments. If you want to integrate with like DevOps and stuff like that, you can. We're not. Let's just hit next again. And finally, we have authentication. For here, I would recommend select manage identity for everything that you can. And then it will give you this option to assign and manage identity. Just select your system assign, meaning the system assign managed identity of the function app itself. And this is just how it's going to access like the stuff you see here, whether it's the storage or the app insight. Hit next, tags, if you want to fill them, and then review and create, and let's hit create. By the way, the reason I chose this consumption plan over the flex consumption plan is this consumption plan, you can actually set it up on the portal. The flex consumption plan is pretty much only done in Visual Studio Code. I thought that it'd be better to first show you this. So today I'll show you this. And the reason is because it will just give you a better visibility on how function apps work so that when we start doing it in Visual Studio Code, it's not so cryptic and you can visually see what happened here and take that insight to your flex consumption designs that we'll do in the future. Okay, our resource is installed. Let's go to it. And here it is, your function app. Function app is a placeholder for functions. And I say that with an S. What I mean by that is you can think of function app like automation account. And then you can think functions as runbook. So you can have multiple runbooks or functions inside a function app. There are some things they will share, and I'll show you that shortly. But if you wanted to create a function, you would do it independently. So as you can see in the screen, we basically have this option, which is to create a function using the portal. This is what is not going to be visible if you do flex consumption plan. So let's hit create in Azure portal. And the very first thing it does, it gives you a template. A template just means what is going to trigger this function. Like you could do a schedule based, a timer, but running them manually, you don't really see that as an option. But as you can see, compared to automation account, there's so many different triggers with so many different services, right? It just keeps going. So we're going to use the EventGrid trigger. Nice thing is when you select this, we're actually selecting a template. So that means it's going to set it up for us. But we don't have to do all the heavy lifting of setting it up ourselves. I hit next. And now it gives me the option to select my function name. So this will be the name of our function, our runbook. Let's just call it runbook broker. It's gonna be between those two things. And hit create. Okay, when it got created, it took us to somewhere more familiar. You see PowerShell. Just like our runbook earlier that we set up, where we had a parameter that was collecting the events and then it was outputting the events. This is pretty much doing the same thing. So these parameters are what's going to come from EventGrid that it's going to capture. And then all it's doing is outputting them on line 4. I'm going to change one thing about this line. Instead of it being outstring, I'm going to say convert to JSON depth of 10 in case, and then just say write output. The parameter is going to come in. It's going to have many layers of data. It'd be nice to just have a visual that we can see the whole thing in one go. And JSON is the perfect candidate for that. Okay, let's hit save. That will save this file. And let's go back to our function app itself. Back at our function app, you can see that that's where our function sits right here. Let's explore some of the tabs on the left. Again, I'm not going to go to everything because a lot of them just don't apply to us. So why even bother talking about it? Like deployment slots, we're not doing prod and dev. Environment variables, I'd rather just go to key vault. On and on, right? But if you were doing like apps, yeah, okay, start exploring them because they may be of use to you when you're developing in that perspective. The main thing I want to show you here is something called log stream. So when I open this, it's going to open an active log stream, meaning anything that happens in this function app when an event is sent
when the function app runs and it fails, or that write output, this is where it'll show up in real time. So if you want to capture it, just have it open and start testing, and you will just start seeing the stream show up here. And if I go back to our function itself and I click logs, this is that same screen. This is what we needed that app insight for monitoring. If we didn't have this, this would not be available to us. Okay, going back, the next section I want to highlight is our app files. So these are files that are on the function app itself that all the functions are going to use in some way or another. Like the host.json, I don't care. You don't care either. But let's click profile.ps1. This is where authentication happens. So right here is where it's saying that when this function runs, when this function app is triggered, this is what you're going to authenticate as. So you're going to authenticate as your managed identity. That's all that this screen is doing. And if you wanted to add more things that all of them are going to share, so like let's say if you wanted to create your own partial function, right? You can write that here, and then all the functions, function app functions that are going to be running, they can use whatever it is that you set here. So this is like the shared file that runs before your scripts run. Next, we have something called requirements.psd1. I don't know if you remember PSD1 from modules. It's a little different. It is still about modules, but you're not writing a PSD1 file like we did in the module. Instead, what you do here is to say, hey, I need a module from PowerShell Gallery for this function. I can add a list here and it'll install those for our function app. So as you can see on line 7, it's saying az equals 15 dot asterisk, meaning major version dot whatever, right? We can actually uncomment this line, and now this AZ module will be available for this function app. It'll be the equivalent of doing install module name AZ version 15 dot whatever the latest is, 15.0.0. And if you wanted to just hard code a version, you can do that as well. But let's really think here for a second. I'm going to install AZ module for this function app that's going to have a very particular purpose, a little broad. Like I'm going to install everything about VMs. I'm going to install everything about Kubernetes, like AKS. Like, why do I need any of those modules, right? What do I really need? Well, I'm going to authenticate as a function app. So I definitely need the accounts module or submodule. And then my function app, all it's doing is starting a runbook job. I could either search every single one of those commandlets and find which submodule it sits in. Like if I go here, if I hit package details, you'll see all these different AZ dependencies, right? I can click accounts and I'll click somewhere in here. Yeah, commandlets, right? Okay, so connect AZ account. That's something I need kind of thing, right? So rather than boring you with trying to discover that, let me just fill it in from my notes here. So this is going to give us connect AZ account, and this is going to give us the ability to interact with automation account. In our case, running automation job. I'll still need to give this function app RBAC access to do so, but at least the module's here. I'm going to hit save. Now, one thing to note, if you ever modify these app files, your function app is already running. You should restart it, because it said restart, that it picks up all those files and installs the modules and does all of that. Just get a habit of that for PowerShell. For other things, maybe not so much. Okay, so we got that. Why don't we test this? What I'm going to do first is in my function app, I'm going to open the log stream just so we can get a visual as things happen. And I'm just going to leave my function app on this screen. And I'm going to go back to our event grid. And I'm going to click my system topic. I'm going to click my subscription. And where it says here, webhook, I'm going to hit change, because I don't want to use that anymore. Instead, I want to use Azure Functions and then configure an endpoint. I'm going to point it to our function app, which is in this resource group. And then it filled out everything else. I only had one of each of these fields, so it automatically filled that up perfectly. Let's hit confirm selection. And that's it. Our EventGrid is ready to basically send data to our function app. Now let's test uploading a file to it. So I'll go to containers and I will upload a file. I'll upload a CSV file. Hit upload. That should be picked up from here any second now, but I suspect it's not going to work. Now that was all we had to do for webhooks, but for this actually is not going to work. And the reason it failed is because when we set up this EventGrid subscription, we added custom headers. By using FunctionApps, we lose this capability. Which is one of the things with FunctionApps, it uses its own headers. So you start adding stuff to it, it's going to start breaking it. Webhooks, this would have worked flawlessly, but now we can't use our variables anymore. Damn it. That's fine. I'm just going to delete them and I'm going to hit save. And for some reason, I have to set up my endpoint again. Fine. Let's try uploading another file and see what happens. And there it is, our output. Okay, cool. So we got the FunctionApp working. Now let's tie it to our runbook. First thing I'm going to do is this FunctionApp, I'm going to give its managed identity permissions to my automation account. And the permission I'm going to give is the ability to start runbooks. So in the automation account, go to access and control and click add role. And the role that I want to give is called automation operator. Right here, it's able to start, stop, suspend, and resume jobs. And for the member, let's click Manage Identity, select Members, and all system assign, and then you will see our function app showing up there. Let's select that, and hit Review and Assign. And now our function app is able to trigger jobs in this automation account. Okay, I just want to copy this out, this JSON. In my Visual Studio Code, let's just build what we would write in there. It's easier to type in here than in there. So we'll say EventGrid event, and the reason why I chose this is because that is what the parameter's name is, right? EventGrid event, that's what contains it. So I'm just gonna kind of reverse engineer it as if this is the event that came in. Single quote, and at the end, I'll do convert JSON to make into an object, like it would be if it came in. So if I run this, now we can actually interact with this information, right? The topic, subject, etc. Cool. And recall earlier I had variables in my EventGrid subscription that I couldn't use. Kind of want to send them to my runbook anyways. So what we could do is, because this is an object now, we can say EventGrid data to add equals that, topic equals, subscription equals, and the subscription name was this. And then we can say EventGrid event, add member, member type, property, name. For the name, we'll just call it EventGrid data. And the values that we're going to put inside it is this right here. Let me just connect to Azure. I don't think I am. Cool. What we should do is set AZ context in our code. How do you run runbooks using PowerShell? And we do that using this command right here, start AZ automation runbook. So we'll just have to give it this information as well as a parameter. Oh, that's not a good example. This is a better example. Let's just clean this up. Well, what are we sending? I don't like this word webhook data. So maybe what we can do is we can call it, let's just call it the same thing that was in FunctionApp. We'll just call it that. So I'll just replace all. It's going to be more like this. So convert it from JSON back into an object. And then select the topic, subscription, then source type file. All right, cool. So that's the parameter we're going to be sending. So we could write param equals EventGrid event equals this variable. So all this data we collected plus this stuff will be sent as a parameter. Just to show you what happens if I run all this, it basically makes us an object, but in that object, we also have the EventGrid data. So if I do this EventGrid data, we have these values as well, right? Now, when you're sending parameters, objects like this may not work. So instead, do convert to JSON, depth 10. And all of these, let's also make them into a splat. So what we should do is say runbook param equals this. Put this in here. Equals. Always good habit to do try catches, so let's do that as well. Okay, now let's get our runbook data, runbook name, our resource group name, and then our account. Just like that. And let's just write some outputs where we can. All right, so let's run this and see what happens. Make sure everything's good. A null key is not allowed. Oh, I stored the variable. Should be parameter. And this should be it. Okay, now we run it. Perfect. We come to our runbook. It queued. I don't care what happens in the runbook yet. Let's finish our FunctionApp itself. I'm going to leave the parameters. I guess we can even leave the output. Underneath it all, let's put this. And if all is well, our event's going to send some data and output it. We're going to trigger that runbook and Bob's your uncle. Let us add a file. Upload CSV file again. Let's see what happens. Okay. Look at that. Already queued, by the way. Look how fast that was. Just because you added FunctionApp in the middle, it doesn't mean FunctionApp is going to take a lot of time. Unlike runbooks, which need to like warm up, be queued, and then fire. FunctionApps just fire right away. And what do we get inside it? We get our almost like convert to JSON happened twice. Okay, I guess I didn't need a convert to JSON here. I apologize. And I needed to make sure that parameters had an S. And with that, our script is firing. Perfect. We just made a storage account, send data to EventGrid, which sent it to a FunctionApp, which sent it to automation account, all without using webhooks. Now, should you use automation account for EventGrids? I think it really depends. For something that's not going to happen often, especially when the job that it's going to trigger is going to take a while to finish, it does make sense to use runbooks. But if it's something that's going to happen rapid fire all the time and it's not too much work, just like this one wasn't, maybe it's better to use FunctionApp itself. And that's what I'll demo next time when we try to make an actual script with EventGrid. Not this stuff with StorageAccount, but let's say every subscription, whenever a resource is created, why don't we capture who created it and at what time and then store them as tags? That could be very useful to have in your environment. So we'll do that next. Either way, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.